Seattle, Washington, the home to grunge, rain, the 12th man, and the politics of a white bread population that would make Margaret Sanger brim with joy. It's no accident that it's also been ground zero for the tabletop RPG industry over the last 25 years. Wizards of the Coast, Paizo, Kobold Press, and Green Ronin all call this city home. It's no surprise that, generally speaking, all of these companies share a common leftist worldview that is certainly the flavor of the day right now. Of course, by now, we all know that Kyle Brink, the executive producer of D&D for Wizards of the Coast, loves to virtue signal about a day where white men are no longer relevant in the hobby. But he's hardly the only one. The Twitter accounts of a surprising number of employees and contractors who work for those four companies openly express their disgust for white people. I've done videos on the racism of Wizards of the Coast, Paizo, and most recently Kobold Press. These people also talk an awful lot about their hatred for white men in particular, and they like to go on about white supremacy. Chris Pramus, the head of Green Ronin, loves doing this. Now, he at least pretends that he never takes broadsides at white people in general. He actually does that surreptitiously in his venomous tweets about the GOP. This gives him cover and plausible deniability. Now, all of these companies and much of their talent like to crow about how progressive they are. Strange, then, that they are seated in a very white, incredibly affluent city. Here are the demographics of the U.S. as a whole. Roughly speaking, whites make up about 60% of the U.S. population, Hispanics around 19%, blacks a little under 13%, and Asians only make up 6%. Now, you'd expect a city that does nothing but say how racially progressive it is would be a utopia for minorities. Yet in Seattle, the black population is only 6.8%, almost half the national number. It's actually fallen a full percentage point since 2010. Latinos only make up 8.2% of the population in Seattle, which is less than half of their national percentage. Now, the white population of Seattle is roughly the same as the nation as a whole. So where is the rest of the population coming from? It's, of course, Asians, who make up a robust 17% of the city. You have to understand that liberals use Asians like they do carbon credits. They're there to make themselves feel better on an a la carte basis. They'll proudly tout their Asian population as a minority when it's convenient. And technically, of course, they are. But it's also fairly amusing that when we're talking about things like test scores for students, they quietly like to exclude that group. We don't need Chang messing up the math curve after all. So let's be clear, when you cut through all the bullshit, liberals talking about minorities and racism are mostly just talking about African Americans, and sometimes when it serves them, Hispanics. It should also be pointed out that Seattle has one of the highest per capita GDPs in the country, coming in at number 4. So what we have here is a city dominated by high-earning whites and Asians, with a minority population well below the national average. Without knowing anything about the prevailing politics of the city, on paper, Seattle would appear to be a pretty solid destination for those darned white supremacists. Now, going back to the RPG game companies, one has to wonder why they choose to stay in an area with so few of their most prized diversity classes. Indeed, when you look at the pictures of the staffs of these companies, it's pretty hilarious, especially when it's compared to their virtue signaling tweets. Common sense would tell us that they're all located in Seattle because they feel that they can pull talent from that population to serve their needs. Yet it's undeniable that the minority population they claim to love and serve is very, very small in their backyard. I think this makes them hypocrites. They're hypocrites because they pretend to care about minority causes, yet they keep themselves pretty well insulated from the minorities themselves. We used to call these folks limousine liberals. Now I suppose we can call them Starbucks socialists. The failure and hypocrisy of these companies can be understood even more starkly by the painful fact that they have not really developed a successful African-American design talent of note. For companies that claim to love progressivism so much, why haven't they nurtured or produced a game-changing African-American talent or executive? Do they need more money? They're already in one of the richest cities in the country. Do they need more time? Most of these companies and the talent behind them have been in Seattle for a couple of decades now. And by the way, these same RPG industry people probably love to condemn flyover country, but a lot of cities in flyover country are a hell of a lot more diverse than Seattle is. So what's the story, you Seattle RPG hypocrites? You'll give BLM money to fund its founders' many mansions, but you're either so racist or incompetent that you can't develop African-American designers of note on your own. You have men like Kyle Brink saying that guys like him need to go, but yet there he still is. If I were a minority, I'd be questioning the sincerity of these people at this point. Indeed, Orion Black seemed to have at least seen through the nonsense when he quit Wizards of the Coast and called them out on their hypocritical bullshit. And don't get me wrong, by the way, I don't doubt that there's probably plenty of African-American talent in the independent scene, which is really where the future is anyway. These big RPG companies are stagnating while they navel gaze and fart sniff, the next edition of D&D being nothing but an update of 5e, plus Paizo's endless copies of 3rd edition show that. Even Kobold Press's Project Black Flag, aka Tales of the Valiant, which was initially seen as a called shot home run, is looking more and more like it's just going to be a dribbler back to the mound. Brazen hypocrisy of these people is really disgusting, and it needs to be called out. You need to call them out on it. Ask them if they know the minority population of their own city the next time they go on about white supremacy. When they try to thrust Asians earning $100,000 a year as a convenient minority, don't let them get away with it. When they put forth mentally ill men in dresses as a shining example of their diversity and inclusion, tell them how ludicrous that is. While the Klan isn't openly marching down Pike Street, just remember that the people who pretend to loathe everything about the Klan get up every day and probably thank whatever creature they worship that they don't have to work with the actual minorities they virtue signal about. After all, wouldn't they just hire those folks if they really wanted to help? It doesn't look like they're hiring too many of them, does it? Well, that's all for today. Remember to share out this video to anyone you think it would help, or conversely, anyone you think it would make uncomfortable. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see videos like this, as well as others. I do cover the culture war invading the RPG world, sure, but I do straight gaming videos with some DM advice, as well as regular live plays with my tabletop group. Don't forget to catch The Lair, our regular live streams, every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have a lot of fun covering the news of the day, video EFAPs, reminiscing, and opening up the floor to you guys. Finally, if you're really picking up what I'm putting down, you can always join the channel and get some exclusive content and some other bennies as well. That is always appreciated, and I do appreciate all of you. So that's all for now. You guys have a great, great rest of the day, and we will talk very, very soon, I promise. Goodbye.
What qualifies you to be a U.S. Senator? You have 60 seconds.
Hi, good night, everybody.